So let's talk about the elephant in the room. That is the guns that the United States sells to Mexico, or at least the ones that can be traced to the United States. Do you think that Washington, is the United States ever going to do anything about stemming the flow of these weapons?
You made a very important point, is that the guns that can be traced to the United States, most of the guns that are confiscated in Mexico from drug violence cannot be traced. So we cannot say for sure that they're actually coming from the United States. They're probably coming from other areas or other parts of the world that have had a long history
But we do know that more than 60,000 American guns have been recovered in the United States over the past 4 years. That's still a lot, and those are figures which have been provided by the United States. Isn't that enough, though, for the United States to do something?
Well, even if we take away those guns, there are a lot of guns in Mexico that come from other parts of the world, from Central America, Colombia, and Southeast Asia. But I mean, any effort from the United States government in order to stop the flow of guns to Mexico is going to be as successful as any effort from the Mexican government to stop the flow of drugs into the United States. It is a very large border. We're talking about 2,000 miles here, a porous border with desert, with rivers, with mountains. It's very difficult, even for a nation like the United States, to stop.
But you won't know until you try. But I guess my point is, I mean, when you're talking about the fact that the guns come from other places and you know, including the United States, isn't that in a way, though, sort of splitting hairs? Because at the end of the day, we're talking about 34,000 people who have been killed in drug-related violence over the last few years. Surely that's something that people need to act on, whether it's the Colombians, whether it's the Mexicans, and whether it's the United States.
Indeed, but the problem here are not guns. The problem here is drug prohibition. As long as you have drug prohibition, as long as people keep consuming drugs here in the United States, you're going to have supply of drugs. And you're going to have a black market.
Well, the Mexican president, Felipe Calderón, doesn't seem to think so. He does believe that, yes, drug users in the United States are the problem, but he's also talked about lax gun laws on this side of the border. And just last year, the U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also said, yes, the United States does need to do more, possibly throwing money at this problem. It isn't going to solve it. So guns is something that surely the United States needs to tackle.
Well, look at all the conflicts in the region, Central America, Colombia. They had a lot of guns when they had the major civil wars, and they weren't bordering the United States. The guns weren't coming from the United States. Drug traffickers are going to get the guns no matter whether they get it from the United States or they get it from other parts of the world. So the problem here are not the guns. The problem here is drug prohibition that is creating a black market and is creating this violence in Mexico.
Okay, Mr. Hidalgo from the Cato Institute, thanks very much for coming in and talking with us and giving us your perspective. The United States says that it's received signs that a former FBI agent who disappeared in March 2007 is being held in Southwest Asia. Robert Levinson went missing during a business trip to Iran. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said, "We respectfully request that the Iranian government undertake humanitarian efforts to safely return and reunite Bob with his family." Now, the governor of the U.S. state of Wisconsin says that layoff notices to public workers will go out on Friday if this bill curbing their benefits and their bargaining rights isn't passed. Scott Walker says that the measure is needed to ease a $137 billion budget shortfall. Moving to Argentina now, where at least 7 children from one indigenous community have died of hunger in recent months. The Argentine government has launched an emergency plan to prevent more deaths. Teresa Bo has more from the town of Salta.
A healthcare emergency. These children belong to the Wichí indigenous community, and they are under serious risk.
Children are undernourished or their weight is very low. What they give us is a bag of food. It's obviously not enough for the children living here.
Throughout South America, indigenous communities are often amongst the poorest. In the last months, at least 7 children have died because of dehydration, diarrhea and undernourishment. Dina Sambo's son died a few weeks ago, probably from severe undernourishment. People say the infant was crying for days. Lack of education is one of the reasons some children don't get treated. Sometimes parents don't take them to a hospital in time.
We did not receive the government's help because we do not know how to claim it. We have national IDs, but sometimes there's so much bureaucracy that it is too difficult.
The deaths have brought the media spotlight to the area and forced the government to deploy an emergency team.
It is true not enough help is being sent here, but the problem is deeper. These people were used to hunting and gathering. They used to fish in some of the rivers that have now disappeared. They have no land.
The government has implemented a universal plan to give money away to poor children so that their parents can buy some food and cover some of their basic needs. But in Argentina's most remote regions, where the presence of the state is not strong enough, children are still at risk. Many indigenous groups in Argentina have found it hard to adapt to a changing world. Much of the land they used to inhabit has been taken over for farming. And though the country produces more than enough food, in some areas children are still in desperate need. Teresa Bo, AlJazeera, Salta.
So while the Argentine government tries to cope with hunger in indigenous communities, the United Nations is warning that global food prices have climbed to record highs. For more on that part of the story, let's cross back to Imran in Doha.
Yes, Daljit, the UN's food price index, which measures prices of basic commodities, is at its highest level since it was introduced 11 years ago. Now, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, says its food price index rose by 2.2% last month. Now, that's the 8th consecutive month that food prices have risen. The price hikes are being driven by a medley of things. Let's give you some of them. The increasing cost of cereals, meats, and dairy products. Sugar was the only food that didn't actually record an increase. And it's now feared an oil spike caused by the situation in Libya could further exacerbate the problem there. Well, Canada have been taking on Pakistan at cricket's World Cup. A foregone conclusion, you'd imagine, or was it? We'll have the full story from Sri Lanka, plus the rest of the day's sport when we come back. You stay with us.